Welcome to the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil
and Renee, where amazing things happen. Our goal is to help build, repair, and restore healthy relationships.
Our primary focus is on the marriage relationship. However, the topics are applicable to the relationships that we value most. Remember, we're stronger together.
Let's grow. You hear that? That's the sound of progress. This is episode 12 of the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil and Renee. And tonight we are going to jump off into the deep end and we're going to talk about a topic. The title of the episode tonight is called Appetite and Relationship Pitfalls. It's about the old and the new and how our appetites can get us into trouble. So what do you think about that, Gil?
Well, the first thing I got was hungry.
You got hungry?
Well, when you say appetite, that's what I always,
But there's lots of appetites other than just food.
It is. And when you initially mentioned the topic, I'm always inquisitive about where the topics come from. And I probably say this on every episode, but it just seems like you come up with a topic, and then sometimes I even have to ask you, okay, I hear the topic, I hear the title, but what are we going to be talking about? And then when you said about the old versus the new, I said, okay, I get it.
Yeah. And when you look at the graphic, I try to make sure that the graphic tells the story. And I got a comment from I got a couple of people that said, man, I just love you guys' graphics. Well, because it's already something that's different listening to podcasts. And so I want to make sure that you engage the eye and make sure that our graphics tell a story. So join us for the rest of this episode where we are going to really go into how appetites affect us in relationships, the old nature and the new nature. And so, are you ready, babe?
Let's go.
For those of you who don't know it, I have struggled with my relationship with food from the age of like 11 years old. Mm-hmm. So, appetites is not something that's new to me. It's something that I've always struggled with. And so, when you really think about how do appetites affect us in relationship, I felt that this was something that would really help us to deal with something that we all deal with, and that is food. And so it's not just going to be about food, because food is definitely not the only appetite. We can have appetites for food and sex and shopping and talking and people's approval and prestige. And there's lots of things we can have an appetite for. And so what we're going to talk about tonight is really understanding how that affects us in relationship. Because I know for me, it affected me in a lot of my relationships. Because I mentioned in the last episode, we were talking about who told you that, understanding your identity. I understood that because of my low self-esteem, I began to find things that I could use to comfort me. And one of those things was food.
Mm-hmm. But when you think about not just from a food perspective and from an appetite perspective, it was something that was told to you at an early age that kind of molded and shaped your viewpoint about yourself. That you carried into the relationship, into our relationship. Yes. So you think about, you mentioned it in the last episode about self-esteem, having a low self-esteem. Maybe that contributed to the low self-esteem because it was an appetite with food. I don't know. And I think that's a part of what happens is we come into life already before we even get into a relationship, before you even establish whether it's a relationship or one going into a spousal type thing, or even just with any relationship, even if you're at a early age, you do have them. Relationships is what I'm talking about. But as you grow, those things are going to be shaped and you're going to carry them into your relationships if you don't not necessarily deal with them, because some of them may be dormant that you don't even know that are there yet until things happen. And once things happen, that's when they kind of bubble up and surface up. And it could have not even anything to do with the people or I would say the catalyst for causing something to come out. But that's an internal thing.
I think about when I first really realized that I had a food appetite issue was we were in high school. We were at the mall and we were sitting around, and basically there were a bunch of guys that walked up and I could see them coming towards us. And we were all sitting there. We had our food, and I jumped up and threw my food away.
You
Whole
you
meal.
just got the food?
I just got it.
Okay.
I jumped up and grabbed my food and put it in the trash.
Why'd you just throw it away?
Because it was it was a reaction. But then looking back on that now, that was one of the indicators that I had an unhealthy relationship with food. Because people could look at me until I ate. So why I felt like I didn't want a guy to see me eating and nobody taught me that.
It wasn't me, was it?
No, it wasn't you.
Okay.
It wasn't you. It was some other guys from school.
Okay.
And so, but when I look back on all these things, and that's when we talk about taking that long journey inward, I start to realize I've had an unhealthy relationship with food for a very, very long time. And that appetite, the way we deal with things can come from an unmet need. And so when you talk about your appetite and your relationships and the pitfalls of those appetites, because for every appetite there is a pitfall. Mm-hmm. If you are driven by the desire to make money, that can make you not available to your family. If you are driven by the desire for food, you can be eating secretly. You can be spending money that's for something in one area on something else. You can be compromising your health. And so it's important that we understand that to every appetite, to every decision that we make, there is going to be a flip side to that coin. And that's why I thought Galatians 5 was such a perfect scripture for us to use for this, talking about appetites and pitfalls, is because everything does have a positive and a negative. You know, there's going to be a cause and an effect. And I thought that Galatians 5 was a great place to really just kind of meditate on and kind of get an understanding of.
Mm-hmm. Now, there are going to be things that you're going to carry into your relationship, but you said something that just kind of piqued my interest. You said your behaviors were indicators of something else. And when you think about that, that's going to carry over into the productivity of your relationships.
Mm-hmm. The quality of them. Mm-hmm. Because you really can't get close to people. One of the things, we've learned that we talk about is that you really can't get close to people who have unresolved issues, who have things they haven't dealt with. Because if I'm trying to keep secrets, and I've said it before, we don't keep secrets, our secrets keep us. And most of the things that we do, most of our unhealthy appetites are normally going to be fulfilled in secret. Mm-hmm. They're going to be something that we don't want anybody else to know about. And so that's an indicator. So we're talking about the pitfalls of our appetites. If you shop in secret, if you eat in secret, if you're watching things online in secret, if you're making decisions that affect your spouse in secret or your family, your children, then that's one of those appetite relationship pitfalls. And so that's what we want to kind of really just bring some of these things up, because a lot of things we talked about it before. We want to talk about the things that people don't talk about, because the things that we don't talk about are the things that can affect us the most. And, I talked about in the beginning about the sound of, the sound of progress. Most of the things that affect us are invisible. We can't necessarily see them, but we're drawn by them. We're being affected by them. And so that's why it's important for us to take notice of, to take an inventory of what's really going on. Why do I feel like I don't want anybody to see me eating it? And everybody thought it was funny. We laughed about it. But when I began to go back and write and, really inventory my life, it made me realize, hey, that's a problem.
That you actually took time, but you were conscious enough to kind of look at your heart and say, what's going on here?
Well, I don't think I didn't do that then.
You didn't make a conscious effort.
No, I didn't. It wasn't until years later, because I write. Mm-hmm. I was writing, and, you just start writing things, and you start looking back on it. It's like, man, this isn't something that just started happening. I can remember buying a box of donuts and eating a box of donuts by myself and not wanting anybody to know that. It wasn't something I was ashamed of it. So to me, anything that you do, any appetite that leads you to do something that shame is attached to it, then that's an indicator that could definitely be a relationship pitfall. So like you said, whether you're single or married or engaged or just dating, we need to be aware of how our appetites can affect us in relationships.
So this is the time.
It's that time.
I'm starting to think this is starting to become a standard. When you in people who listen to the show more than a couple episodes, we get ready to talk about got wisdom, got questions. So what you got this week for Got Wisdom, Got Questions?
Well, we have
Which one you want to start out with first?
Let's start off with the Got Wisdom.
Okay.
The Got Wisdom comes from Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
And the wisdom is you can't get what God has for you in the future if you're holding on to the past.
And that kind of goes kind of similarly in line with what we're talking about on this episode of the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil and Renee, is just that statement. If you have things that you have happened in your past that you have not moved beyond or haven't rightfully dealt with, it can hinder. It can hinder you in receiving what your present future may have for you.
Yeah. And I think about at our stage in life, we've passed the weddings and baby showers, and now we're getting into the funerals and family planning for later stages in life. And so when you think about the fact that at some point we're all going to leave here, we have to make sure that we understand the difference between grieving and mourning. Mm-hmm. Letting go of something means that you let it go. So, which is more like grieving is when you stand. Well, the grieving process is the letting go, and the mourning is the walking away. And so a part of it, we have to learn how to go through the feelings, let ourselves experience it, and then learn how to just walk away from it.
Mm-hmm. And so with the Got Questions, come from one of our faithful listeners. Yes. It seems like.
We love you, Jordan. Our niece, Jordan.
But we just going to bring the questions as we get them. And
that's right.
Jordan, if you send them, we going to say them.
That's right. We sure are.
So here's your question, and I'll let you start with your response. The question was, should you live with someone before you marry them? And if the answer is no, what if you marry them and move in together and still having problems trying to live that the way that they do, almost like cohabitating? Now you got to make those adjustments. Right. What would you say to that?
Well, I would say I've been asked that question so many times by so many people.
Not just Jordan.
I mean, Jordan, you're not the only person. I've been asked that question so many times.
Well, that was especially probably at the salons.
At the salon, even dealing with Air Force, young Air Force people. You never say, well, you don't buy some shoes and don't try them on. That was their mentality. But a part of what marriage is, it's the ultimate compromise. It's the ultimate learning to be selfless. And so, no, you should not live with someone before you marry them. Yes, you're right. The answer is no. And a part of what marriage is it says the two shall become one. It's about you learning to understand and accept the other person's uniquenesses and differences, and hoping that they're going to do the same thing for you. Because there's going to be things about the person that you're not going to like. Mm-hmm. You're not marrying you are marrying their habits, and you're going to be affected by their habits. But I think a part of those are some things that you should know long before. Because you don't have to live with someone to really get to know them. You just have to be honest. You have to be transparent. You and I didn't live together, but I knew how he was because we spent so much time together. And there's some things about a person that you're going to be married to that you may not like. Mm-hmm. But there's something about you that they're not going to like. Right. And so that's what I think marriage is. It's two different people becoming one. And that's a choice. It's a commitment. And it's a sacrifice.
And I would even back up a little bit further. And I remember having something similar to this question, but if I had to say a prelude to this question would be, is I used to ask a lot of the guys who used to work for me as we would be on patrol, or younger guys, and I would ask them, what is the purpose of dating?
Yes.
And when you even in today's vernacular, what is the purpose of dating? It's preparation.
For
I
marriage.
say, this is
Right.
Gil saying, I say it's preparation for marriage.
Right.
Preparation for a long-term relationship and a commitment to another person.
To death do
And
us
kind
part.
of what you just kind of similarly what you described is this is even because her beginning of her question was like moving in together. So I'm gonna say kind of piggyback off what Renee said. No, I don't think you should, because one, it's preparation for marriage. So you think about the whole dating process that you're going
Right.
to. You're going to be spending a lot of time together, and if you're thinking about one small aspect of it, of being together under one roof, that's just a small part of a relationship. But there's a part that you have to. You're going to be making adjustments
Yes.
along this whole relationship journey, you know, and where her question was, what if you can't make those adjustments? Well, more than likely the person can't make adjustments that you have either.
Exactly.
So that's almost looking at it from the perspective of you're right and they're wrong.
Or they're the problem and you're
You're
broke
good.
and you're fixed.
Right, you're good to go. And
Right.
that may not be the case, because I'm pretty sure there's some adjustments he's going to have to make to live with you.
Right.
You know,
And
so
vice versa.
Right. So that's something to think about. It's going to be a compromise. It's going to be times of adjustment, and those things happen. As Renee put it, the two shall become one. And Renee didn't put it that way. The Bible puts it that way.
And I think the thing that you said, when someone asked what was the most important thing, being willing to change.
Mm-hmm.
Being willing to not be who you are, but to think about how what you're doing is going to affect other people. Because everything that you do and say, it affects other people.
Right.
And so in order to have healthy relationships, we have to be willing to be the best version of ourselves, the God created version of us.
Yes. And so those are our God wisdom and God questions.
Thank you. And we forgot to say thank you. This is our time in our show. We thank you guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing the podcast. Thank you for your feedback. Come on, y'all. We need some God wisdom, God questions. All of you guys who listen to the podcast, please leave your question, share your wisdom. Thank you in advance for that. And thank you for an opportunity to just be together again on the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil and Renee.
And you can send those questions in to the website. You can reach us that way at richrelationshipsus.com, or you can actually also send an email like Jordan is doing at richrelationships.us@gmail.com. Gil and Renee Beaver's over 30-year relationship is the genesis for the Rich Relationship Podcast, which is designed to empower individuals with the tools, principles, and the community needed to unpack ourselves, our past, and our preconceived notions associated with relationships.
Let's get empty and grow together so that our lives will be filled with love and healthy, rich relationships. Now let's go into our show. Isn't it funny that something that we have to have every day could cause so many problems in our relationship?
Like what?
Like eating. Eating is something we have to do, but it could lead into addiction. It can lead into sickness. It can lead us into diseases. And so, especially in our culture, because we really never really talk about the effects that our appetites have on our relationships, it's almost like a silent killer. You know, it could be destroying your relationships without you even being aware of it, because it's one of those topics that it's like the elephant in the room. You don't want to bring it up. It's like, how do you begin a conversation with someone? Because one of the things I loved about you never ever told me that I needed to lose weight or I needed to stop any of the things that I knew that you saw me doing that were wrong. You never really confronted me. And I don't think that that's something you can confront someone on. When someone is struggling with an appetite that's out of control, I think that you have to kind of be there to support them and maybe help them navigate to a place of understanding that what they're doing is affecting them. But it's not like something you can make somebody come to terms with.
Well, when you think about it, it's one thing that I think people are good at. People are good at monitoring other people's behavior.
Yes.
It's very good at seeing shortcomings and pitfalls and things that people need to change, things that people need to do differently or the way we think they need to do them, because we have our own perspective, our own ideas about how somebody should be doing. But that kind of goes back to what you said at the very beginning. It's not about me monitoring you in your weight status or things that you may be doing in your life as much as it is about me monitoring the condition of my own heart as it pertains to maybe some of the addictions and things that I have in my own life that could be affecting my relationship. It's that self-examination that we constantly reiterate over and over on the podcast, because it is vital that people take a look at those things in their life and do some heart examination to say, man, what's going on? You know, you have to really stop and assess what's going on, because if not, you're going to carry those things into your relationship, and it seems like it may be something that kind of sets it off. You know, it could turn into a conflict, or it could turn into a problem that you may have with someone in a relationship because you haven't rightly dealt with, or it's almost like the saying, well, this person made me do this,
right,
or get angry because of this, or because I did something to kind of set it off.
Right.
And it's not so much that I did something to set it off, because whatever that was that kind of bubbled up on the inside of you and made
right.
it come out.
Right.
Sometimes it comes out as anger. Sometimes it comes out as guilt, or turn into a conflict. Or sometimes it doesn't necessarily have to be confrontational. It could be make you feel bad.
And it can make you turn inward. It could cause depression.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's one of the reasons why there's so many episodes of suicide in this generation, because there's so much about what's going on the inside of us that we've really never learned how to unpack and confront and deal with, that we keep pushing it down. And then, like you said, something hits you or bumps you, a situation, life bumps up against you, and then it's the blame game. You know? It
comes out. And that was already there.
Right.
It was just something that caused it to come up. And one thing that I think is important is, if you really think about it, those things don't come up until you're really in a committed relationship with someone. You think about it, if you're just in a casual relationship with someone, it's not a big deal.
Right.
A passing
you probably don't get close enough to them to really understand or see what's really going on.
No, you don't, because you haven't progressed that far in the relationship. It's once you've kind of made that commitment to the relationship with that person that you say, now they've kind of taken a closer step inward into your kind of inner parts and into your inner space, to where now they're going to see some things closer than a casual relationship that may come up, and you're like, whoa, where did that come from?
Right. I remember, it's so funny you would say that. I remember the first time I saw you lose your temper. I remember we were sitting on the couch, and you used to love like those little games, like
Rubik's cubes and puzzles, any kind of puzzle. Yeah.
And you were sitting there, and you were playing with this. Was it the Rubik's cube? No, it wasn't the Rubik's cube.
It was one of those puzzle type things.
It was another one, like the long. It was the long.
I used to carry these things around with me just to keep my brain working on stuff.
Yeah, and you couldn't get it fixed. You were like, and you just tore it up, and I was like, oh my gosh.
I just lost it.
I didn't know you could do that, because Gil has always been so calm and laid back. I can count the 2 times since I have known you that I've seen you lose it. It was that game, and it was Monique.
Oh yeah, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, but that wasn't that was controlled.
But this one that you're talking about was not controlled.
Yeah.
And I remember the time, because when it happened, it was frustration.
Yes.
That kind of built up in me, and again, like what I just said, it was already there.
Right.
The puzzle was just the catalyst that bring it out, even though I wasn't being, that anger was, or that frustration wasn't pointed at you.
It wasn't directed towards me. I just got to see it, and it was really scary.
But it just kind of made you go, whoa.
It's like, because you know they always say you have to watch quiet people. That was an example of me saying, oh my gosh.
What is going on with this? No. This guy is crazy, letting this puzzle just get him all frustrated where he tears it up.
But I think it goes back to what was the appetite that triggered that reaction. And you've always had a desire to do well and to excel and to be successful. And
while there are still areas like that, but one thing that I can say about us is just like that, this was you did in reverse. You became, and we say this before, and when those appetites and those things kind of come up, you have to be, as a person in relationship with someone else, you have to become a student of that person.
Right.
Because in order for you to be able to see things like frustration bubble up,
right,
it's not that you studying it like it's a class or an exam, but you know what, it kind of sort of is, because if you think about when you go into a relationship with someone, there is no book. You know, yeah, the Bible gives you guidance on things about being in relationship with people, especially in Proverbs, but I'm talking about a daily application type
of that
thing.
person.
Yeah, of that particular person, to where you're like, whoa, I don't have a book on this. Especially you think about when we grew up, we didn't come from what people would consider as the normal family,
right,
mom and dad in the same household.
Well, the traditional.
The traditional.
Nobody, I don't think anybody's family is normal.
Right.
The traditional family.
So you have the mom and dad, the things you may see on TV, the growing up, and then so you actually see your parents in their relationship, and so you have something to model at your relationships after, you know. But the thing that I think is missing in that equation is you don't get to see the intimate side of your parents' relationship and I'm not talking about it from a sexual encounter. I'm just talking about the intimacy that they have as a husband and wife, that kids don't get to see, because when they close the door, so they're still kind of at a handicap, because they still don't know what it takes to have those interpersonal relationships.
How to work through things, problem solving, conflict resolution.
They don't know how to navigate those things. So it's almost like you're trying to figure it out as you're going in it. You know, it's almost kind of building the house while you're trying to live in it at the same time. And that can be very difficult. And then you're working without a plan.
Right.
So you kind of have a very big challenge.
Well, you have a plan. God has given us all a plan for our life, but as far as a plan for that specific person,
for that relationship,
takes time.
Yeah,
it takes you, like you said, being a student. It takes you being willing to watch and listen and ask questions and say, "Hey, baby, what's going on?"
Right, you know? Because I had to almost learn to speak Renee.
Yeah, and I had to learn to speak you.
Because it's almost like a foreign language, you know, to where sometimes, and it's nothing that you do consciously, that you may say one thing or I may say one thing, and you know, well, I heard what you said, but based on what I know about you and me being a student of you, I know this is something else that is going on that I may have to address from a different perspective. So that's something that we have to be mindful about, even in those relationships that we're in. And I think it's important that we go to it trying to seek to understand that person that we're in relationship with, rather than reacting.
Right.
Because if you can react, if you react to their situation or circumstance or whatever it may be, just like me in the puzzle, if you just reacted and ran out the house or started telling me,
we wouldn't be here right now.
Or either that, or you just see me reacting and say, you shouldn't do that. Or trying to control my response to frustration that I had. Now you're telling me how I should be. That kind of goes back to you monitoring my behavior, trying to control it from this aspect, to where it's like, wait a minute, don't try to, just like you did. You just, at that time, I don't recall you just saying anything about it, but you just kind of like, you probably stored it in the back of your mind somewhere to like, sometimes he gets frustrated and it just comes out.
Well, the thing that I thought of was, oh, wow, he really is human, because, you know, all this time I just thought he was just perfect. And I still thought that for a long time. And perfect is not without flaw. It's, you were just so different from the things I saw and the things I'd experienced. And so it was good to see you react in that way, because I was like, oh, okay, so he's human just like me. It helped me not feel as crazy.
Well, but and one thing that I can say that you were very instrumental in, and even to this day, is helping me understand my feelings and my emotions.
Yeah.
You know, especially as a guy, we may not be. And I had a conversation with someone today, one of my coworkers, and we were talking about kind of emotions and feelings and things like that. And one thing that he said was, sometimes I don't express how I feel. and because I'm not a talker, and then that's how he presented
Right.
it. But what I thought about, it's not just him. I think that's a natural trait of most men.
Yes.
And I'm not going to say all, I'm just going to say
Right.
most, because we only, just like that, I can show frustration and I can show anger. I'm either frustrated or I'm angry.
Right.
Those are the only two emotions I got.
There's so many other.
Yeah, but what you have done over the years that we've been together is to help me navigate what I feel and be able to identify it and be able to say, okay, this is what you feel. And that kind of goes back to where we started this conversation out, is from the beginning of examining your own heart.
Right. And understanding that the appetites that we have, you know, like we talked about, everything has an origin.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to take the time to say, well, what's causing me to do this? So even like you said, some people may not know how to express how they feel, and you may think you're not expressing it, but whatever you don't talk out, you're going to act out. And you can watch people, you can watch their behavior when they're drinking a lot, or when they're shopping a lot, or when they're eating a lot, or when they're using, you know, pornography, all those things. They're doing that as a cry for help, whether they realize it or not, because God created us to live in balance. And so anything that's in an extreme is an indicator that something else is off. And so, like you said, we have to learn to be students of people. We have to look at people and watch them and care enough about them that when we see things going on, like you mentioned one day, you see someone, it's like, hey, what's going on? You just seem a little out of sorts. We have to care enough about people to pay attention to them.
We jokingly said, whether it's with Aaron or even with you, sometimes I say I feel the disturbance in the force.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm being very serious.
Yeah, you can feel it. When you care about people, you can feel what's going on with them.
Because I watch.
Right.
You know, the people in my inner life, I watch and I see, even all the way down to the little ones who are living with us now, that I see, and I'm like, what's going on? And even then, to where it's like, I'm paying attention.
Right.
So you have to pay attention to the people in your life that are around you, not just somebody you're in relationship with,
Right.
but also to your peers and your coworkers and your friends, and even people you just casually meet along the way. And especially if it's a regular encounter
Right.
that you meet, you know, to where you say, and be sensitive enough to say,
Something's wrong.
Something's up,
Right.
you know,
Something's
and just to
going
say,
on.
hey, is everything okay? How is everything going? You know, just to show that you care, that you're
watching them.
Right. And I love it in the movie Avatar. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, but in the podcast, but it's a scene in the movie where he says, I see you.
Yeah.
You know, and
Oh,
we say that to
love
each
that.
other
I love
jokingly,
that.
but you have to see the people
to see
in your
them.
life that you are close to, or and maybe not even a closeness to, but
Right.
that you interact with. And when you do that, you're going to be more in tune to what's going on, to the people in your life that are around you. And I think that's really, really important that we do.
Yeah. And we talk about a pitfall. If you think about a pitfall is something that you fall into. You know, I talk about the tunnel of deception. That's something you go into. A pitfall is something you fall into, and you need somebody to help you get out.
Right.
And so we need to be the eyes and the ears of Jesus, and we need to make sure that we watch people and we see them and we pay attention to them, so that those pitfalls, those relationship, the appetites, and those things that can pull us away from people don't begin to consume us. Because we definitely need each other. We say that all the time. Remember, we're stronger together. Let's grow. Well, we have to do that in community.
Oh, because it's vitally important, because in that community, that's where real growth happens.
Right.
Nobody is an island unto themselves, because if you're there and you're out there by yourself, when things really happen or things come upon you, you don't have someone to rely on.
Right.
And that's important. On this episode of the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil and Renee, we're talking about the appetites that can cause relationship pitfalls. And one thing that you kind of said earlier that I want to kind of revisit a little bit was when we were talking about strengths and weaknesses and in the people we're in relationship with. That's a part that's really important, that I have to understand that I'm going to have weaknesses and you're going to have strengths. And it benefits us as a couple and as a relationship when I can respect those things about you and really allow you to be who you are and you allow me to be who I am. I think that's very beneficial in helping me to even discover what those pitfalls may be, because 9 times out of 10 I would even be willing to say the pitfall is probably a weakness that I have, a deficiency that I have in me, for whatever reason,
right.
From life.
Because we're human.
Right, from life, nobody comes perfect, everybody has scars and wounds and dings and bumps and those things and that they bring into the relationship. And so those pitfalls that we have are going to be, I think, something that can be addressed by the strengths of our significant other.
And helping the other person by encouraging them and not tearing them down.
Mm-hmm.
Telling somebody, you're fat, you whatever their issue, pointing their issue out in a way where it makes them feel powerless to change it, or making them feel as if they have a problem and you don't, is the wrong way to help people who are struggling with any type of addiction or any type of appetite that's out of control. There has to be a gentle way you confront it, but it can't be where you're accusing them or you're making them feel condemned or you're making them feel less than. More, if anything, is creating a healthy, safe place where you said, like you said, hey, what's going on? I'm noticing some changes in you. You want to talk about it? Where you give them the opportunity to talk about it, not where you tell it. Because I know for me growing up, my mom was like, oh, you just so fat, and tearing someone down is never going to help them to trust you, to be vulnerable with you, or to change. People do not get better from, remember the wisdom we shared with Monica Pearson. That was one of our Got Wisdom she shared. People who can give you constructive criticism can show you what you're doing wrong and then show you how to fix it. Destructive criticism is only telling you you're never going to be anything, you're never going to change. That's not constructive. And it's not going to help you to get healthier and to get stronger or to get free from that area of unhealthy appetites if the person is using a very negative way of confronting you about it.
And speaking of negative ways, we kind of talked about emotions and identifying emotions, and this, I think, is important because those pitfalls have triggers.
Yes.
And this is something that I was thinking about this earlier, and I just jotted down some identifiable things because we always want to help.
Right.
As you listen to the podcast, to give you some things to do.
Right.
And this is one of the things that I think helped me that you were instrumental in helping me was identifying the emotions that I was feeling. And there's another part to this, and especially as a man, and not just saying men are deficient in identifying emotions, anybody can be, as some women as well, but these are some emotions that can help us to identify the triggers to the pitfalls. I feel frustrated. Scared, insecure, embarrassed. I feel taken for granted.
Yeah.
I feel unloved.
Yes.
I feel ashamed. I feel like a failure. I feel old.
Yeah.
I feel stupid.
Wow.
I feel abandoned. I feel betrayed. I feel jealous.
Right.
I feel disrespected. Those are all can be some kind of triggers, and what I think is important is that once you can identify that thing,
right,
you have to name it.
You do.
You have to call it what it is.
Right.
Because I
think
not
live in denial. Oh, I'm fine. Nothing's wrong. There's something going on with all of us, and it's okay not to be okay.
I remember being in a small group that we were in, and it was a men's small group, and one thing that was very instrumental for me during that small group was kind of along the lines of this. Was one of my pitfalls was I'm good.
Right.
Ain't nothing wrong.
Right.
I would say that was a feeling or an emotion of denial.
Yeah.
I was almost and I even told, and I shared it with the group, because once I shared it with the group, it made me
Free.
more it definitely freed me up. And one of the benefits of it freeing you up is it actually loses the power over you.
It does, because things like that need darkness. They need secrets.
Yeah.
Lies need darkness.
And that's part 2 to that. So the first part of it is identify it.
Mm-hmm.
Call it what it is. Put a name on it.
Right.
Because that pitfall that you're feeling, or that trigger that sets it off,
Right.
and that thing that sets off it could come out and manifest in different ways.
In so many different ways.
To other people. And those other people probably didn't have anything to do with it. It was already there, like we said earlier in this episode. But those pitfalls or triggers and these emotions have to be identified.
Right.
And then once you identify them, then you can own them.
Right.
Once you own them, then it's going to lose its power over
Right.
you. That's going to free you up. And by it freeing you up, then it's going to make you more beneficial in the relationship that you're in. So when something comes up again, you can say, oh,
yes.
That's
what am I feeling?
That's jealousy, or
right.
That's I feel disrespected, or I feel
right.
taken for granted. And then if I can share that with you, putting it in our own life
right.
in this scenario, I share something with you how I feel. I feel frustrated,
right.
and then when I tell you that, and I really appreciate this about you, is that you never say you don't feel that way. You shouldn't feel that way.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things that if you find yourself doing that to someone that's in your life, if they come to you and bring something to you that they're feeling, mm-hmm. don't tell them they
right.
shouldn't feel that way.
Or that it's not true.
Right.
Because it's true to them.
Yes.
And we said it before. The things that people do make sense to them. And the things that people feel are real.
Absolutely.
It's real to them.
Yes. And it's neither good or bad.
Right.
They're just feelings.
They're just feelings.
And that person has to, and you said it earlier during this episode, that person has to have the freedom and feel safe enough to bring it to them, bring it to you. And if you don't have a spouse, or you don't have a boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, find somebody that you can feel confident, or have a confidant that you can bring it to, that you can have a safe place to say, hey, this is what's going on with me.
Right.
Not so much for accountability, but you have to get it out.
You have to get it out. And it's not just to say, well, I'm just going to pray about it and tell the Lord. You need the Lord, but you need people. God uses people to help us to get better. Relationships are where we learn the most about ourselves and God, because people will bring things up, and situations, the closer you get together, the more things are going to start to kind of rub, and the more likely you are to learn something about yourself that you can't learn when you're by yourself.
Right. And that's important. So on this episode of the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil and Renee, we're talking about the appetites, that triggers that brings us into pitfalls in our lives. That's really important in our relationships. So we've been talking about it, and I really appreciate the time that we actually have to talk about it, because as we talk about it, it brings it to light, and this is going to be out on the internet forever.
Yes.
You know, that no matter we don't know who's listening to it, we just hope that it actually meets you where you're at right now, and gives you hope, and gives you some solutions and maybe some ideas to think about, to where you can take them and say, hey, so that's something that's new.
And one of the emotions that you didn't mention was the feeling of being alone, or that it's just you. We say it all the time. You are unique. Your situation is not.
Right.
We all have some appetite issue that we struggle with. The people who are closest to you need to know what they are.
Right.
You know, we always say, I am weak. You know, there's certain things that I know, like, because donuts were my, go-to food growing up.
Your kryptonite?
Yeah. That's not something I'm going to go and buy a big box of them. Well, now I have celiac, so I don't have to worry about that. But you have to make sure that you know what your triggers are. You have to know what your areas, your area that you are more bent towards struggling with addiction. It's, for some people it's alcohol, for some people it's drugs, for some, it's that the list can go on and on. Right. You have to identify, just like you have to name your feelings, you have to also own whatever it is that has the power to have control over you. Mm-hmm. People who are closest to you already know it, but a part of it is you being humble enough and vulnerable enough to say, hey, this is the area I'm struggling with. Would you please, keep me accountable.
And help me.
You know, help me. I need help. We need each other.
Absolutely.
And I think the greatest way to overcome appetite pitfalls in relationships is humility. Being humble enough to say, I don't have it all together. Because guess what? The thing that I know about food, it's the one addiction that has a visible tail. You know, most of the addictions that people struggle with, you can't see the evidence of it. But when you have a food addiction, when you're struggling with that appetite, it's going to tell on you. And you can be in denial and come up with all these nice excuses and reasons as to why that's not what it is. But that's the one thing. And I'm grateful because it's protected me. Because my issue is visible. So when I'm struggling, it's visible that I'm struggling.
Right.
And so we just have to, like you said, we have to own it. We have to accept responsibility. We have to be willing to go to God and also to people so that we can begin to get healthier, because it's hard to get close to somebody who's keeping secrets because it traps you. You can't get out and they can't get in, and it keeps people away from you.
Well, the good part about that is by listening to the podcast,
yes,
you're letting us in.
Yes.
And we're here to help. We're here to support. And
Yes.
we're here to be
Yeah.
along the journey. So
Yes.
we thank you for this time. We thank you for hanging out with us, as we always say.
Yes.
And just remember, we are stronger together.
Let's grow.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for your investment in time. Remember to subscribe to the show and hit the notification icon to be notified when new episodes are posted on the podcast platform that you're listening from.
Or you can always find us on our website at richrelationshipsus.com or our YouTube channel, Rich Relationships with Gil and Renee. If you found this podcast helpful or you think it could help someone that you know and care about, please pass it along and share it with them.
And also, you can always send your questions and comments to richrelationships.us@gmail.com. This is a weekly podcast, and the new episodes are going to be posted on Monday by 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Remember, we're stronger together.
Let's grow.